Hey everyone, it's Joe, and this is my version of the Fender 5F2A Tweed Princeton. And these are actually 2 out of 3 that I built. One is currently for sale at a local music store. I'm planning on keeping this one, and then I'm also planning on selling this one. I didn't make a build video for these because, as you can see, it's pretty much the same design as the 5E3 that I built last year. But it's definitely a different amp, and I'm really happy with how these came out. Even though I really like how the 5E3 came out, I think these are definitely an improvement quality-wise. So I thought it'd be good to make a little video on these. I'll give an overview, a detailed tour of all the woodwork and all the wiring and everything, and I'll do a little sound demo at the end. So, like I said, pretty much the same design as the 5E3 that I built last year. If you've seen that video, I kind of documented the entire build from scratch. The main difference with these, other than it being a different circuit, is that I didn't build the chassis from scratch myself. I didn't actually do the metalwork this time. I bought the chassis from Weber, and that's just because since this was originally a project where I was planning on selling all of them for profit, even though I decided to keep this one because I liked it too much, that was the original plan. And so it just made more sense time-wise to buy a chassis that would end up looking better than what I could make and just save me a ton of time, and it's not that much extra money. Other than that, pretty much the same design, just scaled down a little bit. And the circuit, if you're not familiar with the 5F2A Tweed Princeton, is pretty much the exact same circuit as the 5F1 Champ, except it's got a tone control. And personally, I think that's kind of like what the Champ is missing. Even though the Champ is obviously a great amp, I think having the tone control on there is a really helpful thing. So that's why I decided to build 3 Princetons instead of 3 Champs. So that's pretty much it for, I think, the overview of these amps. So now let's do a little tour of what everything looks like. Alright, so I think a good place to start would be at the front with the speaker baffle. Just like on my previous amp, I used 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood and covered it with this maroon grill cloth from Guilford of Maine. I did change my design on the baffle itself though. Instead of going with the Uncle Doug method of using little risers on the edges to elevate the cloth over the hardware, I actually just recessed the T-nuts into the plywood so I didn't have to do that extra step of gluing on those spacers. And I also left a little strip of plywood over the speaker hole to protect the speaker a little bit. Now, moving on to the frame here. This is just a pine board covered in 2 coats of polyurethane and finger jointed, as you can see. Got the Fender replica handle. And then if we spin it around here, here's the control panel with that Weber chassis. I think I mentioned this, but I'm really happy with the quality of the Weber chassis. I did have to drill some holes myself for the turret board that I built, but other than that, all the holes were pretty much perfect. Then we've got the back panel here. This is 1/4-inch Baltic birch ply. For the tubes, I've just got JJ tubes in here, 5Y3, 6V6, and the 12AX7. And for a speaker, I've just got, I forget which speaker it actually is. I'll probably put it on the screen here, but it's just a relatively inexpensive Jensen that I think sounds great anyway. And then more back paneling down here. One improvement that I am definitely happy with these over the 5E3 is the little details on the inside are definitely better. For instance, I actually sanded these cleats and put polyurethane on them. The whole inside of the amp looks a lot cleaner, and all around I think they just look pretty good. So now let's take that back panel off and look at the wiring. Alright, so this is what it looks like inside the chassis. Pretty simple circuit, as you can see. Like I said, same thing as a Champ except with that tone control, and I guess there is also that extra filter cap there. But other than that, basically a Champ circuit. This time I made sure to use high quality belt and tube sockets because on my 5E3 I used some kind of crappy sockets and then regretted it and ended up replacing all of them, which is a little bit of a pain. Got the fuse up there, power switch, lamp, the volume and tone pots, and the inputs. And I did make this turret board myself out of some fiberglass that I bought off of Tube Depot. I also did source all these parts myself. This was not a kit build. I picked out all the little capacitors, resistors, and everything myself. And one thing you might notice is you might think this wire looks a little thinner than it should for a 2-amp circuit, but this actually is 20 gauge wire. It's just Teflon insulated and the insulation is really thin, so it just looks like thin wire. And it is a little bit more expensive than your just regular wire, but it's really, really great to work with because it's so thin. It also holds its shape pretty well. So I think it was worth the extra little bit of money because it just makes for a really clean looking build. That's pretty much it for the chassis. One other thing I'd mention though is I put this sticky foam insulation tape on both edges of the chassis to prevent it from rattling against the back panel, because sometimes if you just have the back panel resting right up against the metal, you can get some annoying vibrations going on at high volume. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the circuit, so I will put this thing back together and then we can hear what it sounds like. Alright, so for the demo, I'll be using my new Strat. It's a 96 made in Mexico with custom shop pickups that I got on Craigslist a couple months ago, so that's cool. Just keep in mind, if you're comparing this to the 5E3 demo, it's kind of an apples oranges situation there, because with the 5E3 I used a Les Paul, which has humbuckers. And humbuckers are obviously going to break up a lot more than single coils. But with that in mind, we can start off with some cleans. I've got the tone at 9, and now I've got the volume at like 2.5. Alright, got the volume at like halfway right now. So we'll start to hear a little bit of breakup there. Alright, might as well bring the volume all the way up now. Kind of get some Neil Young type tones with the Strat. Bring this thing all the way cranked. Might as well do some neck pickup. So yeah, that's pretty much it for how this thing sounds. Sounds pretty nice, especially when you crank it all the way, I think. So yeah, that is how my 5F2As sound. Hope you enjoyed. And as for future videos, definitely look out for those. subscribe if you want for those. I've got some cool projects coming up, including some repairs, hopefully some new amps, and some other stuff. Might not be for a couple months, but it's coming. So like and subscribe if you want, and I'll see you next time.